Work according to the standards that the world wants. We don't mind hard work to live every day. But even if you work hard, it's hard to become rich. That's because there is a standard that the world wants. Those who work according to that standard can become rich, says SayNo's author. For those who are working hard in this world, I hope you listen to the author. I will go back to heaven. On the day I finish my picnic in this beautiful world, I will go and tell you that it was beautiful. Pochian Sangbyan wished for. I wish I had my own house. He even said, "Who wouldn't buy me a house?" I shout out loud to heaven. But in 1993, he ended his life in a house of 3 households, other than the owner, where 14 people lived together. So he even said, "Poverty is my job." Why was he poor? He only wrote poems because he liked them. Why was he poor? Because he wrote poetry in a land where poetry collections are not well sold. As a poet, most people are bound to be poor if they only write poetry. However, although he is the same poet, Liu Tihua, who appears as a writer or translator in many books, is not a poor poet at all. He is a competent editor who finds out what ordinary people want to read and commercializes it. And he also knows marketing techniques to earn money from the world. If you are a poet, it is up to you to decide whether to live like 1,000 or a Liu poet. No one can say that either life is superior. However, no matter what your job you have, you must know what the world wants in order to earn more economic rewards from the world. Failure and poverty are the only things that come back when you go into self-hypnosis, without even knowing what the world wants. Most of those who fail blame the world for their failure, ignoring the standards it wants. They complain that the world is unfair, that the world is rotten, that it consists only of academic backgrounds and personal connections. The excuses for those who fail make up a long, long repertoire. But keep in mind, successful people know that when something goes wrong, they find the responsibility and cause in themselves. I hired a new driver a decade ago. I was always nervous at the time. The average employee's face was stiff all day when he was scolded by the boss. But he smiled brightly and said after 5 minutes, even though I was furious about nothing, "Mr. Boss, it's time to go to the meeting place." He looked at the map in advance and checked the side streets, even though he knew it. When he bought me a book called "Go Back If There's a Traffic Jam," he was so happy. Most drivers seem to think, "Is this my fault?" when they were stuck in traffic. But he didn't do that at all. "Mr. Boss, I'd like to take a look at the alley next to me. What do you think?" I was always in favor, despite the weather forecast that it would rain in the afternoon. He kept the car clean. That's not exactly the case with most drivers. He finished reading all the books I recommended and didn't even play Huachu in the driver's waiting room because he was bored. First of all, he did his best to manage the vehicle and asked the younger employees if there was anything he could do to help him with the rest of the time. I've never met an article who bought a car maintenance book with his own money and studied it, even though I didn't ask him to. A year or so later, I got a new driver, and despite considerable opposition from the majority of executives and employees, appointed him to the position of sales manager of a company with annual sales of 40 billion won at the time. The reason why the opposition was severe was that I did not specifically explain why I assigned him to the position of sales manager. They also misunderstood that I made that decision because he was good at fawning over me. I was just saying that he had a different fundamental attitude toward working than you guys. After about 3 months, all clients praised him for his personality. No one in the company doubted his qualifications anymore. After about 6 months had passed. Then, a year later, he offered his resignation and came to me. He said he knew how to make money, and let him go. I let him go with great joy. A few years later, I heard that he was running a business, kimchi souffle factory with his wife, with the saying that he had about 10 employees. When I appointed him as the sales manager, the new driver soon learned what had happened to his predecessor. And of course, he cared very much about everything he did to me, expecting to be given such an opportunity. Needless to say, I was very polite to my family too. He often explained to me that he had previous experience in sales. When my predecessor resigned from the position of sales manager, he began to ask me to do so. He wanted to work in the sales department as well. Because he was so annoying, he sent him as a sales executive and said to the sales executive, "Have him for a few months because you won't last long." He resigned within 2 months as expected. Why did I ignore him, who struggled to act like a senior? The attitude of working in the posture the world wants comes from the perception deep in the bones. This is because the quality of the red sugar dance in front of me is different from the behavior that comes out of envy. Therefore, there is a leak and exposure because the senior does not know how to act in areas where he has not yet set an example. It is an action that is intended to be seen by others. So if there is no one to see it, its nature is often revealed. That is why I say that red tomatoes run well even without red sugar dance. Now change your standards no matter what you do. You never get rich by the standards you set. The rich are people who have worked by the standards the world wants. The standards the world wants are much higher, wider, and deeper than you think. Work to the standards of the world. That way you get rich. Did you enjoy it? It is said that it is difficult to get out of poverty if we think by our standards when we work. The standard that the world wants now, working accordingly, is a shortcut to becoming rich. Are you working according to the standards that our society wants? For those of you who watched this video, today will be a better day than yesterday.